If there was an odometer for the government shutdown, what do you think it would read right about now? I ask because this shutdown has been going on for more than 2 weeks, and a whole lot of things seem not very shut down. Air Force One is still working. Donald Trump was able to fly off to Israel and Egypt and declare peace in the Middle East over the weekend. When he got back, he was able to give Charlie Kirk a posthumous Medal of Freedom. There was a risk the military might not get paid this week, but it seems like the president cleared that up. On the other hand, it definitely seems like some Americans are feeling an impact.
The IRS furloughed more than 30,000 workers yesterday, which brought many of the agency's operations to a grinding halt, despite delays.
And there was some confusion over the weekend. Hundreds of CDC employees were mistakenly sent notifications that they were laid off, while more than 4,000 federal workers were sent termination notices last week. President Trump says he'll use the shutdown to target his political rivals. In Congress, the shutdown...
This is exactly what they said they were going to do, right? They see a crisis. They see an opportunity, and they're going to continue doing what they did during the Elon Musk-ing, which is
Elon Musk-ing? Is that what you just called it?
Yeah. The Musk-ing.
David Ferris writes about politics and teaches at Roosevelt University.
Right. So Musk is gone, but his spirit lives on.
David says supporters of Donald Trump have always had a theory of the shutdown. It goes like this: a shutdown is for thee, but not for me. They're pretty honest about it, actually.
They have told us many times that they want to use the shutdown to destroy things that are important to Democrats. The president came right out and said this. He's like, oh, this is an incredible opportunity. I can't believe they gave it to us. And we're going to get rid of some things, and those things are going to be Democratic things.
I'm used to a world where a shutdown is for everyone. But I don't know that I imagined a world where a shutdown was just for one side of the aisle.
Well, I mean, I didn't imagine a world where the government was for one side of the aisle, right? The performance of Trump in office has been this unbelievable flowering of gutter partisanship, where the president is constantly getting in front of a microphone and insulting people that live in Democratic cities and insulting the leaders of Democratic states and cities and threatening to jail them and cut off their funding. This has been going on since the day he took office, which is, I've started calling this abusive federalism, which is a process by which the president of the United States looks at our system of government and views it not as an opportunity to cooperate with different levels of government, but as a way of punishing his partisan enemies, right? So if you live in a place that voted for Kamala Harris, you are presumed an adversary, you're presumed an enemy, and governance is not for you.
Okay, but if this was an abusive marriage, I would get a divorce.
Yeah, I would too. The problem is that we live no fault divorce has not come to the American Constitution, unfortunately. States have a lot of powers, right? But they are definitely the junior partner in the relationship with the federal government. And when the federal government and the state governments have a clash, generally speaking, the Constitution resolves that in favor of the federal government.
But that is not stopping some states from dreaming. Today on the show, why Trump's shutdown theatrics have spawned a new way of thinking about what happens now. Some are calling it soft secession. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. With the weather getting cooler, if you're like me, you're looking around for a couple of new items for your wardrobe, like a new sweater, some cute new kicks. And Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. I went over to Saks.com to check out what they've got on tap, and I gotta say, what I love about clicking around their website is that every piece looks special, one of a kind. As if you'd walk into the office or a party and instantly grab everyone's attention. All the big brands are there, stuff like Alice and Olivia, the young and trendy stuff. I love that I can see the care in every piece Saks has chosen for their fall collections. Each dress or pant or shoe feels a little bit elevated. So if you want shopping to be fun and easy, head over to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day. Today's show is brought to you by Vanguard. For all the financial advisors out there, let's talk bonds for a minute. Capturing value in fixed income is not always easy, but Vanguard bonds are institutional quality, which means top-grade products across the board. Vanguard's lineup includes over 80 bond funds that are actively managed by a 200-person global team of sector specialists and analysts and traders. Their philosophy is that the best active strategies should be shared across the team, so every client benefits from their collective brainpower. Vanguard's long-standing establishment and scale allows them to invest across all kinds of sectors, maturities, and geographies, which means they can spot and act on opportunities that others might miss. So, if you're looking to give your client consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at Vanguard.com/audio. That's Vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation Distributor. Can you do me a favor and lay out for me how, over the course of the shutdown, we've seen a disproportionate impact on Democratic states and politicians? Like, can you just give me some examples?
Yeah, sure. It's very easy because they announced it on like the second day of the shutdown, right? Like Trump's bureaucratic henchman, Russell Vought, the head of the Office of Management and Budget, almost immediately after the shutdown, Mary, almost as if they had it planned, they halted a long series of federal infrastructure projects or projects that were in partnership with the federal government and being funded by the federal government in some way, shape, or form.
These are projects in Chicago and New York.
Yeah, so blue states, blue cities. The list was 100% comprised of states that voted for Kamala Harris. So all of the infrastructure projects that were halted, and these are mostly like physical infrastructure projects or green energy projects, they were all frozen.
Philip Bump, the journalist, he did a map where he literally was like, this is the map of the states that voted for Kamala Harris. This is the map where the infrastructure projects are halted. And it was the same map.
It's the same map. Yeah. And of course, that doesn't like bring daily life to a halt or anything. But what they did in Chicago, we have it's not a subway here. It's called the L, but we have an L line called the Red Line that goes north to south in Chicago. And they were going to extend it 5 miles south into areas of Chicago. They're typically underserved by public transit and really needed this extension for a long time. They've been talking about, I moved here in 2010. They've been talking about this Red Line extension since the day that I moved here. And it's finally underway, and Trump and Vought looked at it and they were like, no, we're not going to do that because I'm mad at you. And so, thousands of people are put out of work suddenly. The work stops. The money vaporizes. It's not the first time Republicans have done this, right? But it's the first time that I think that they've been so open about kind of laying siege or punishing states that voted for the president's opponent and really not being apologetic at all.
And the funny thing is it's a little unfair to think about this as just impacting Democrats, because tens of millions of people who voted for Trump live in these places. There are 16 states, I think, where contracts were halted. Tens of millions of people who voted for Trump live in those places. And so that's the thing that I think is a little galling for a nerd like me, which is like, this is not just about like blue places because blue places don't exist.
Right. It's just such like an impoverished view of the country and the people that live in it. I mean, there's more Republicans in Illinois than there are in Iowa, and they're like Republicans live in the city of Chicago. I think Trump won like 18% of the vote here. And so looking at a map of the country and looking at the people who elected you to serve the whole country and viewing some of them as like less than human or less than equal because they're Democrats requires you at the same time to roll like millions of your supporters into that bucket and just like punish them too as collateral damage, like almost saying like, well, I mean, if you want infrastructure, you better move to Indiana.
Looking at how this is playing out, I've seen more and more people ramp up the language by which they talk about what needs to happen now. The most amped up language I've seen is soft secession. You can also call it uncooperative federalism, as some have. Do you have a preferred term for what you think Democrats need to be thinking about doing now?
I mean, I think soft secession is great.
It's legible in a way to people where they're like, oh, that's what we're doing.
Right. It reminds me of, if you think back to the period just after the acute phase of the pandemic ended, and it was a real employees market, and people were talking about quiet quitting. We're conducting there's a thing in organized labor called a work to rule strike, where instead of going out on strike, you look at like the manual, or you look at the regulations of your company, and you obey them to the letter, which, as it turns out, in most workplaces would grind everything to a halt overnight. And so I think that soft secession, like anything that the governments of blue states could do to communicate to the federal government that like what the federal government is doing is completely unacceptable, would be helpful. If they all add up to a kind of like a memo to Trump and Vaught that like, we see what you're doing, like we were not born yesterday, and it's not going to work, right? Like, yes, we don't have the same levers of power that you do, but ultimately, like, what we're doing is we're thinking about ways to fight this.
Interestingly, I've read that sort of a state intentionally separating itself from federal priorities in this way was actually a conservative idea. And you can see how it played out in Texas, actually, under Joe Biden, because you had Greg Abbott doing things like deploying the National Guard to the border, doing his own kind of border operation. And that's maybe a more proactive example of what a state might do in a situation like that, because it's not quiet. It's pretty assertive in terms of how it plays out. But it's a good example of a state making a choice to do something on their own without federal sign off.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things that Greg Abbott did in 2023 and 2024 were like much more confrontational in terms of state power versus federal power than like anything that anybody in a blue state has done since January. He very specifically deployed the Texas National Guard to prevent CBP from accessing a crossing site from Mexico, right? Like, so there was this like landing spot.
Patrol.
The Border Patrol. It was like, you can't come in here.
Could you imagine if like Pritzker deployed the Illinois National Guard to stop ICE from, I don't know, shooting pastors in the head with pepper balls?
Yeah, I mean, the entire right-wing ecosystem would like have a total meltdown overnight, right? It'd be like front page news on the New York Times. But because it was Republicans doing it in 2023 and 2024, and we were like pretty busy with other things, like thinking about how to get the old man to not run for president, it really flew under the radar. And Joe Biden just didn't really do anything about it. He didn't seem to want a confrontation with Texas over immigration.
Yeah. I mean, others have pointed out that Texas has used its economic power too. Like a lot of red states, Texas had an issue with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, and they blacklisted companies like BlackRock, which is New York headquartered, and that had an actual impact on BlackRock changing its policies. And so that's maybe an example of more what you're talking about, what blue states might be interested in doing now, which is using their economic heft to make changes that could impact their constituents. Blue states are heavily invested in the federal government, right? Through tax revenue, and they actually give more than they get.
So like California and New York alone provide about a quarter of federal tax revenue. Just those two states.
A quarter? Jeez.
A quarter. Yeah.
That's just remarkable to just sit with for a second.
It's wild. I mean, the comparative economic power of blue states is wild. And if you add up all the states that voted for Harris in 2024, they provide about half of federal revenue. And that's excluding the battleground states. And so, yeah, it's not like 65-35 or anything, Mary, but like, yes, blue states provide more revenue to the federal government than red states. And that to me it's like kind of an unsustainable situation, right? Where you have a group of states that are disproportionately contributing to the federal government, and the federal government is turning around and punishing those states and withholding their tax dollars from them, and withholding them in the form of like, we're halting infrastructure projects. We're threatening your public schools if you don't persecute trans people. I feel like we're approaching a crisis point where it's like, I don't think that this can go on for another 3 years without some kind of confrontation or crisis. I'm not calling for secession, Mary, okay, so if anybody's listening to this, but...
Not even softly?
Soft secession, yeah, as long as we're clear that's, I'm not asking for any states to withdraw.
after the break. If we're not telling blue states to leave the Union, what does a soft secession actually look like?
The warning signs are all around us. Record-breaking temperatures, extreme floods, wildfires, and other natural disasters. Animals like polar bears and whales vanishing before our eyes. And the Trump administration is making it worse, rolling back protections and sacrificing the planet that future generations will inherit, all for corporate profits. But when people come together, they can make an impact. Backed by 3 million supporters, NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council, leverages the full power of the law to challenge corporations or government agencies that would illegally destroy our environment. They won nearly 90% of lawsuits they filed against the first Trump administration. Now, as their caseload grows, they need your support. Help stop oil and gas drilling in pristine wilderness, protect endangered wildlife from extinction, and safeguard our planet's climate for future generations. Make your gift today. Donate and your gift will be matched 5 times at nrdc.org/next.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
When it comes to what your family eats and drinks, you know your choices matter. You're the expert because you know what fits your life. And getting it right starts with good information. That's why America's beverage companies are sharing more information about our ingredients at goodtoknowfacts.org. No spin, no judgments, just the facts straight from the experts for more than 140 beverage ingredients. Visit goodtoknowfacts.org.
I mean, you've started thinking bigger about how blue states can use their leverage here. Can you just lay out some of your ideas? Because you've talked about stuff like, I don't know, like if you roll into a blue state with your red state car, maybe you're getting charged more for traveling the roads, those sorts of things, which I hadn't thought about.
Yeah. So, I mean, interesting to me is that the states administer like allegedly federal highways, right? And they pay for them, and they set the tolls and stuff like that. And it got me thinking about like when I take my kids to the aquarium in Chicago, which my children really love, we get a discount because we live in Chicago. And if you live outside of Chicago, you pay more. And I'm not aware of any court cases based on this practice. But it's pretty common to charge for state universities to charge people more if they live out of state. I mean, that's a very well-established doctrine, and there's no particular reason that you couldn't use this for all kinds of things, right? Like the Illinois tollway system could charge people from red states like 5 times the tolls that they apply to people from blue states. So that's one little lever that you could pull, and it would make things very uncomfortable for people that drive through Illinois. There'd be some complications in terms of like trucking and shipping and stuff like that. There'd be some collateral damage, right?
Minor things.
Right, like little things. But we're in an era where we don't care about collateral damage anymore, I guess.
The issue I see with this is that I feel business is so enmeshed in everything all politicians do at this point that I could see, for instance, Disney having real beef with this idea. If you're saying, going to Disneyland in California is going to cost you more because you're from Texas. Maybe they wouldn't because they have Florida, and Florida, I guess, would not do this. But I do see the way our structure works right now, the way our businesses are so integrated across the entirety of the country, how those actors might just put a halt to any kind of attempt to do something like this.
I mean, I think there'd be huge pushback from the business community. The other problem that I see with this kind of on the margins action is that I'm just not sure that it would have the political impact that we think it would. Maybe with the pension idea, I think that would probably be a little bit more effective.
Lay out the pension idea again.
So the pension idea would be blue state public employees have their pensions invested in various hedge funds, whatever investment vehicles that might be headquartered in a red state or might have valence in a red state, and you pull them out and you invest them elsewhere, right? And so you're depriving some important set of red state businesses of vital investment revenue that keeps the lights on and makes the wheels turn.
You're basically proposing BDS for red states. BDS is, of course, boycott, divestment, and sanctions for Israel. It's what a lot of pro-Palestinian protesters want. The government does not love it.
We've seen the government try to criminalize BDS in a lot of cases, right? So I could also see the federal government looking at any kind of these boycott efforts and punishing them, or just being like, this is Antifa, so we're going to shut it down or investigate it.
For real.
I think the bigger problem with that, again, is that we're assuming that affecting the bottom line of an important red state company will cause either the political leadership in red states or the voters in red states to be like, wow, we've really crossed the line here. We've got to walk it back. Get that red line extension started again, folks. We can't have this. And I think, unfortunately, one of those things we've seen over the past 10 or 20 years of our history is that material outcomes have become almost totally detached from people's evaluations of the performance of the government.
Well, you proposed one more idea, which would be much more direct, which is paying taxes. What if people were not paying federal taxes? And I should note that someone wrote in Slate just this year, if you're thinking of not paying taxes because you're upset at the federal government, don't do that. But it is a much more direct line. People saying, I'm going to withhold federal taxes, or the state saying we're going to intervene and not withhold federal taxes from people's paychecks. I don't know exactly how it would work.
So there's no question that the federal government is disproportionately dependent on our tax dollars. And individuals do have some control over how much they contribute out of their paychecks, right? But they don't have a ton of control. And I was thinking back when I was paying my taxes in April about how they just fired half of the IRS, and a lot of my income is freelance. And I was like, why am I doing this? No one's going to look, right? They fired everyone. What's the point? I think that most people are not in my position, though, right? Most people have one job, and that job deducts X amount of dollars from your paycheck. And if you go to them and you're like, I don't want to pay any taxes, I'll pay it at the end of the year. That's going to raise some red flags, right? You might get yourself audited.
Well, and there's this other issue of if you are withholding your taxes because you are committed to the quote unquote rule of law and you don't like how things are operating, and yet you are attacking the attack on the rule of law by disobeying the rule of law, it creates some contradictions here.
Right. And I think it would allow the Trump people to kind of point the finger at us and be like, see, I mean, there's basically a tax insurrection out there. They're not paying their taxes. I do think that they'd have a scale enforcement problem, right? If 10 million, 20 million, 30 million people stopped paying their taxes, I don't think that they have the capacity to rectify that situation with the current staffing levels. But I think the number of steps here is it's too high, right? You'd have to have some kind of democratic coded leader being like, you know what we're going to do, everybody? We're going to organize a tax strike. You'd have to convince individuals to go to their employer and be like, I'd like you to deduct fewer taxes from my paycheck. And then you'd have to provide support for them.
I have to be honest, David. There's a whiff of desperation to all of these plans that we've laid out. Not going to lie. How do you feel about that?
I don't like the position that we're in. It's very difficult to step back and be like, so what can we do? And it's very disappointing for me to report that I have stepped back for a while and I've thought about what we can do. Thinking about state governments and federalism, and there's just not that many buttons to push that don't involve mass national direct action rather than a protest. I think you have to escalate to the next level, which is something that's very unfamiliar to Americans, but pretty familiar to people in other countries, which is a general strike. As people need to withdraw their labor. with a discrete set of demands. I mean, it's not like we're not going to get rid of the Trump administration, but I do think if you cobbled together a list of like, these are 10 things that need to stop happening, and we're going to grind the country to a halt until they stop. I honestly don't really see another path to just waiting around to 26 and 28 and suffering through what these folks are going to do to us.
I agree with you, but I don't see anyone in a position to write down those demands and get everyone on board. That's what scares the bejesus out of me.
We have there's like 2 political parties in the country, right? And one of them is
like, are you like, right?
One of them's
right?
in the opposition. It's almost like they should be the ones coming up with these ideas. Ultimately, if you want to communicate to those like totally normie voters that don't pay tons of attention to politics in between elections, and you need tens of millions of them to win an election, the only way to reach them and say like, this is what we're doing, is through political leadership. Right? And that means the political leadership needs to get on board with something pretty radical. And I don't see them having reached that point yet. Well,
they have shut down the government. I mean, the government is shut down.
We're getting there. But we're definitely not there yet.
David, thanks for coming on the show and chatting with me. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you, Mary. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish I had easier answers and a nice button to push to fix this, but we're going to be in this for a while.
David Ferris is a political science professor at Roosevelt University. He's also the author of It's Time to Fight Dirty: How Democrats Can Build a Lasting Majority in American Politics. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Paige Osburn is the senior supervising producer of What Next and What Next TBD. Mia Lobel is the head of audio here at Slate. Ben Richmond is our senior director of podcast operations, and I am Mary Harris. Go track me down on Blue Sky, say hello. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time.